Today. It's great to have such a great response for our webinar, or should I say our seminar this afternoon. A couple things I want to cover just real quick before we get started is I really want to encourage everybody out there to ask as many questions as you'd like during the session. We want to make this as interactive as possible. And to do that, there are two ways. You can either use the Q&A feature at the very bottom of WebEx, or you can follow the conversation and ask questions to us using pound awareness inside Twitter. So you can see what everybody else is talking about and engage in the conversation with us. And we're really excited to have a great speakers list lined up for us today. A lot of people that I have a lot of respect for and I'm really excited to be chatting with today. And today's webinar, just so you know, is going to be a little different. We're not going to be doing slideware that you may be kind of used to when you go to web seminars. We're actually going to be having a conversation. So in a lot of ways, it's going to be very audio-driven. We have some backup slides, but for the most part, it's going to be very conversational. So with that, I'd like to introduce today's panel of people that we've assembled for this session. And first, we have Chris Brogan, who, if you follow social media, chances are you've heard of Chris. You're probably following him on Twitter. He's a social media guru, and really what he does is he helps companies work through and understand tools like blogging and communities and helps them build more business value, especially from a marketing perspective. He's currently the president of New Marketing Labs, and if you aren't checking out his blog, you absolutely should. It's www.chrisbrogan.com, so we're really excited to have Chris on the line with us. We also have someone who I'm a real big fan of Paul Gillin. His two books, the New Influencers and his most recent book, the Secrets of Social Media Marketing, are absolutely two of my favorites. If you haven't had the opportunity to read those yet, I highly recommend going out and ordering them from Amazon. It's a great book. It's a great read, especially for people who are getting into the social media marketing space. He's also the founding editor of Tech Target, and he's going to be a good friend, and I'm really happy to have him on the line as well. I'm also joined by Dave Carter, who is the CTO and founder of Awareness Networks. Dave is responsible for the vision of the company as well as the product, and we're really excited to have him on the line as well. And finally, and last but not least, we're also joined by Marcy Cohen, who is a representative from one of Awareness's clients, Sony Electronics, and she's actually been with Sony Electronics for 8 years in the corporate communications department. She's responsible for internal and external social networking strategies, and very recently, in fact, at CES 2009, she launched a blog, a community, I should say, for Sony enthusiasts. So we're really excited to have all of these great speakers on the line, and like I said, please feel free to ask absolutely any questions you want using Twitter or through the Q&A tab. So I'd like to get started just chatting with Chris and Paul. And Paul, first, I'd like to get you're out in the marketplace, you're working with a lot of different companies, helping them to define their social media marketing goals. And I was wondering, at a high level, what issues are you seeing with the companies that you're working with?
They're having problems figuring out what tools to start with. A lot of this is a tools-driven market still, so we hear we want to start a blog, we want to start a social network, and how do we do it? I try to counsel them that really is the wrong question. They should be starting with the business objective and then figuring out what tools match that objective. And it may not be a social media solution that they need. It may be something completely different. We hear a lot of questions about ROI, which I think is a straw man. I think this question is still an issue of finding a reason not to do something by saying we don't have the ROI. The fact is the ROI on traditional media is traditionally terrible. The only reason that we have an ROI is we've been doing it for so long that we figured out we have some expectations. But the lack of an industry standard on ROI, I guess, is the main reason that I hear for people being kind of stumped right now. And really trying to encourage them to look at the fact that there are many, many ways to measure the effect of social media campaigns, many more ways than there are in using traditional media, and simply, pick 2 or 3 metrics that are important to you and measure those, and don't worry about figuring out what everybody else is doing.
Paul, just around that conversation about metrics and ROI, are there any common ones that you see coming up? I mean, I've heard different, companies talk about, some companies look at page views, other companies look at number of people that they have signed up for their community or, on whatever social media tools they're using. Are there any that you're seeing become more common across businesses?
Everybody has their favorites, and I'd say page views is the one most people default to, and it's probably also the least meaningful one. I like to look at time spent on site. I like to look at referral URLs to tell where your centers of influence are, and also visitor tracking. I think a really important one is to look at what pages are sending visitors to the place that you want, sending them to an order page or to a download page, because those are the pages you want to double down on. You know, think of it like playing a poker game. You want to double down on your winners, and you want to fold your losers. And the pages that are getting people to the actionable parts of your site are the ones that you really want to focus your energies on promoting.
Very interesting. So, answer this. Why do you see kind of best practices as important? You kind of alluded to it in the first answer that companies are trying to figure out the right way to get things going, and they're still struggling with, you know, how they implement social media in their companies. Well, why are best practices important for companies to use, and do you see companies implementing best practices?
Well, best practices are important for getting the project by management, because most companies don't tolerate failure very well. So they'd like to look at what's working and duplicate that. That can be an impediment to innovation, but it does help move the industry forward. And as we see now, Peter Kim has a wonderful list of social media, corporate social media initiatives. Over 300 companies now doing something with social media. Clearly, this form of marketing has turned the corner now and is becoming mainstream. But it really is the fastest way to get approval is to say, oh, well, Kodak is doing this, or Southwest Airlines is doing this, and they're having great success. So best practices do serve a function.
Talk a little bit more with you, Paul, about the state of social media marketing. I mean, obviously there are a lot of buzz around it at the moment, and just as an example, you know, everybody that's on the webinar today, I mean, it's a great example of social media marketing and how companies are starting to use it. But do you see companies, when they actually go out and adopt it, is it really kind of a top-down philosophy where they have to adjust their thinking as a whole from a marketing perspective, as opposed to going in and just kind of, you know, adopting new technology and implementing it?
Well, you can start it with just an individual, and certainly we've seen some successful blogs that are run by a single person in the marketing communications department, and that can work if you have a point project like that. What we find is that as social media marketing initiatives spread and more people get involved, then it does change the culture of the company. There's a very interesting study that McKinsey published just a few weeks ago, and if people want to Twitter me at P. Gillin, I can give you a link to it. About how the transformative effect that social media initiatives have on companies. And what McKinsey found is that companies that have really committed to social media marketing, they find it changes everything. It changes their engineering, their product management, the way they develop products. It's a totally transformative experience. But you have to start somewhere, and the marketing department is the most logical place to start. When I was thinking of how to write the last chapter to my recent book, I decided to focus on that term, social media marketing, and I said, 5 years from now, I think we'll look at the term social media marketing as kind of a quaint old anachronism, that the idea that social media was ever the domain of one department will seem kind of weird, that it will be so embedded into every aspect of the way customers and companies interact with each other that we will be, it'll seem sort of odd that anyone ever thought that it would be just the domain of the marketing function.
That's an interesting story. I was actually, I was talking to some folks at IBM, and they had a group of guys in their IT department that actually came up with a video that they put on YouTube, and some of you might have heard this story before, but they put a video out on YouTube to describe some of the big servers that they were selling enterprise-type companies. And the marketing department initially got really upset at it. They said, you know, you guys got to take this stuff down, and you know, we can't have this stuff out on YouTube. And then they stopped and thought about it and said, you know what, this is actually really good for us. They're getting millions of page views. You know, people are actually checking this stuff out and they're learning more about it. And I think that's a great example of you know, the power of social media beyond the marketing department.
Just to build a little bit on that example, I love that example. The series of videos is called Mainframe Art of the Sale, and there are 9 of them. And they're humorous videos that were done by a group of salespeople, actually by the head salesperson within IBM for the mainframe division. The reason they did that was that they were trying to attract young people, college students, to work on the mainframe platform. Mainframes were seen as being, you know, old school, and people were avoiding them. And they went to the channel that these young people were using, which was YouTube. And the videos are very funny. They're very amusing. All internally done. No professional videographers working on them. It was a skunkworks operation. Traffic to their mainframe recruitment site increased by a factor of 7 in the year after they started posting those videos. So it was an absolute home run for IBM. Again, with a very specific business objective in mind.
Absolutely. And I think that's the heart of it too, right? I mean, at the end of the day, I think a lot of companies are starting to look at social media and say, yeah, we want to adopt it because there's a lot of buzz around it, but if there's not a clear business objective tied to it. And I think that's one of the things that we've been hearing as well here at Awareness is that, you know, how can you help us figure out the right way to implement this stuff? How can you tell us the best practices that are out there, and how can we leverage them in our own organization so we can really benefit from what's going on?
And what you're going to see now, Mike, is there's going to be an explosion of interest. I'll tell you, we're in a recession, and I'm having the best January I've ever had because, and I hear this from my colleagues in the business too, that companies are just very, very interested in applying these tactics. And one reason is that the cost benefits are so compelling. The cost of a Twitter account, of course, is zero, and we see all kinds of success that businesses are having with Twitter. Blogs are cheap to start. Even social networks can range from zero for a site like Ning up to maybe a few $100s a month for a really robust, compelling social network of the types that Awareness provides. I mean, this is small potatoes compared to the cost of buying a TV ad or even a magazine ad. So I think we're going to see an explosion of interest relative to the economic situation, of course, an explosion of interest in these new channels this year because recessions, remember, typically are a time when everything gets questioned and everyone focuses on cost, benefit, and on economic leverage. Last recession, 2002, it was lead gen. Lead generation programs took off like crazy because they had immediate payback. And I think now we're going to see social media because the costs are so low.
Absolutely. Yeah, we agree with that, definitely. I just want to check one last time. Paul and I were just talking about a couple things. We were talking about first how, kind of the state of social media, and we're then started to talk a little bit more about how social media has been defined typically as a marketing term, but it seems to, branch out beyond just the marketing department inside companies. And so I guess what's your take? I mean, what are you seeing out in the field in terms of social media and the companies you're working with? Just from kind of a state of the state type of perspective.
I think that it's a circumstance where it's permeating inside and outside of companies right now. These tools that we're using to sort of connect with each other on a one-to-one and very personalized way are the way that people are starting to look for what we're calling sort of an alternative to dial tone. I think that people are bringing their own dial tone, which is a line that Jeff Pulver, visionary co-founder of Vonage, says nowadays, which is to say that instead of just reaching out to people in the mindset of calling them on a phone or calling through a customer support line, these conversations are happening with or without organizations out in different fields and internal to the company. So, for example, I was showing a company today how to do some listening and how to look for where people are talking about you that's not on the phone line. Mm-hmm. And what I'm finding is that the same kind of passion that people are having to build communities around things that they're passionate about is going a lot further down the road to more products, more services, things that people have a sense of passion about. And I feel that secondary to that is also the notion that internally, companies are starting to realize that some of these community and collaboration platforms are helping us talk about business in a much more humanized way. And so things that used to be just for the kids now seem to be a way that people are looking to do business, and especially as our workforce is shifting more towards the entry level and the mid level being millennials.
Absolutely. So two things I heard out of that I think are important are number one, that conversations are happening, whether you're having them internally or they're happening on the web, and it's a matter of people actually, and the second point is listening to make sure that they know, number one, where the conversations are happening and how they can engage in them. Is that fair to say?
No, totally so. Totally so. And it's Marcel Lebrun, who's the CEO of Radium 6, has this line about the social phone's ringing. Are you there to answer it? And I'm finding that organizations are getting some really interesting opportunities to have conversations outside of the standard channel, which amount to business. Enterprises are doing this. B2B platforms are doing this. Retailers are doing this. And so I think that there's just a lot of opportunities to have business conversations. And I think we've kind of got the social for social sake and the communications for communication's sake down, but I'm excited that businesses are jumping on this. This to me is, 15 or 20 years ago when email was finally coming into companies. This is 30 years ago when we were doing a little bit more with faxes and all that. So this is part of that conversation I think that's moving the evolution of business communications forward.
Absolutely. So just one last question I'm going to jump over because we have a bunch of stuff coming in through Twitter, and one that just came up is, so what best practices are you seeing out in the marketplace, with the companies that you work with? What are they trying to implement on a daily basis, or at least to support their social media strategy?
That's a really great question. So, there's a few ways. Some are just to capture the relationship between enthusiasts. So some companies are realizing that they've got communities of interest out there, and either by supporting a third party's organization or by building their own community platform for people to have those conversations, they're able to tap into a whole group of people that are enthusiastic about the product. Another sort of a best practice for doing that sort of thing is companies understanding that we've gone past this notion of a straightforward, simple marketing message, and now we need sort of more of almost a media awareness, like a conversation situation versus standard talking points and standard one-way kind of conversations. Now it's a matter of understanding how do you equip your business to do two-way conversations and at multiple levels, not just through, say, your PR channels. So what I see and what I'm kind of counseling people to do is start looking at the idea of possibly media awareness training for people you wouldn't have originally thought should have had that kind of training. And the other is how do we equip people either to participate in other people's communities and or how do we make the best community type experience for those enthusiasts and or loyalists who want to get a little bit deeper into the game.
That's a great answer. It's actually a really good segue to our next topic. One of the big things and one of the reasons that we invited Paul and Chris to be on the call today is that yesterday we actually announced a series of best practice communities that we're bringing to the marketplace that we actually ran by Paul and Chris and talked to them a lot about as we were developing along with our customers to figure out what the best practices were out there in the marketplace. And so I'm going to ask Dave Carter, our CTO at Awareness, to just really quickly talk through this. And then what we're going to do is come back, talk a little bit to Sony, and then bring Paul and Chris back in and start going through all the questions that we're getting through Twitter. So with that, Dave Carter.
Thanks. I was following the Twitter stream. First of all, there was a typo in my Twitter name. It's DKR Carter, so all you people that think I have one follower that ever use Twitter, that's not correct. DKR Carter. Thank you very much. I think it's been retweeted 1,000 times that I'm a Twittiot, is I think what it's been referred to. Best practice communities are kind of an evolution, right? Because we used to be able to say last year that social media did this and social media did that. But social media is kind of like email. Everyone can point to an example of it being a waste of time, i.e. people circulating jokes, or it being the most valuable thing since sliced bread. And it's not until you stop saying the term social media and you start talking about the business case that you're solving that it starts to get credibility. Now we're a platform first, but we end up building these different communities on top of the platform. So really all we've done is we've said, what are the ones we find ourselves building over and over again? How can we template that, not just as a community, but how can we template that and help guide customers with what kind of ROI they should be looking for? So really what we came up with that we've done over and over again are communities like a corporate voice community, which is where an executive would speak out to the public, and while they have to say back and comment on things, it's really meant to put a personal voice or a personal face on a company. Marriott's been really successful. If you Google them, they've shared a lot of stats on how successful they've been, but that applies across a lot of brands. There's also people that do user-generated content campaigns, which are simply a request for content, but all of those have the ability to evolve into an actual community. So if you build it right the first time, even though you may not have profiles enabled and all those things, you're simply saying, share a story, share a photo, then you can actually upgrade that community later on if it's successful, if you find you have a right and a conversation going on. Enthusiast communities, draw people together on something they're very passionate about. And you can't, as a brand, hijack an enthusiast community. You can sponsor an enthusiast community, but you can't sort of say, hey, we're CVS Pharmacies, come talk about what a great, store we are. That's where you need to sort of pick and choose, where you play. Cannondale's a great example of that. They gave a place for their racing teams to actually talk about their experience riding Cannondale bikes. Association subscriber communities, one we've been doing a long time, they tend to be more knowledge management. Get the association and membership together to share information, to ask questions, to have this giant, big dialogue, and they seem to have a little bit of all the separate ingredients. And I say ingredients, it's kind of my metaphor that, our platform is really a whole bunch of ingredients, and every one of these social media use cases is really just a recipe. And it doesn't mean that it's stuck and that it only works this way. We can mix and match ingredients and create hybrids of these things, but we're really just trying to, lay it out that these are the 8 that people are thinking about. Loyalty communities can have a little more brand because really you as a brand are trying to say, thank you for being a customer, here's more information, or here's a program you might want to be a part of. Innovation communities are mentioned a lot in Groundswell, where you simply reach out to your customers and say, you have ideas to share, you have product features you want, tell us here. And those ones are easy to get ROI on because you can point to the ideas that you actually adopted. Peer support, the other one that Groundswell mentions heavily, and I think people like that because there's a solid number you can apply to a peer support community. You can say, here's how much we pay per hour for support, and here's per question, here's how many questions were answered by our customers. And then event communities. We're seeing almost every big event now is prefaced by a community to get the conversation started and direct the conversation well before the event, and it keeps the momentum of the event going after it's over. So people trying to start the second version of that event, say a quarter later or a year later, have an existing base of people that they can expand on. Now, all of those communities can't be measured the same way. And the example I always use is, if you're measuring ROI of a corporate voice community, page views isn't so bad. To understand how much reach that individual had with the public, well, page views and time on site, those are standard sort of web metrics. Those are things that I agree with. If you were to apply that exact same metric to peer support, it would actually hold a negative connotation. If people are coming to a peer support site to get an answer, they want to go to the site, get the answer, go back to what they're doing. If I'm trying to get my printer working or my new hardware device working, I don't want to chat. I want to go to the site, find my answer, and get off. So a high number of page views might actually be a bad thing for a peer support site. When you look at things like innovation communities that sometimes have best practices. And we did one of these for McDonald's, and they could point to 3 or 4 best practices that if those were implemented across the 26,000 restaurants, those would have huge financial impact. And only the client knows the value of some of those individual best practices. So, I would say don't run away from ROI. There's a ton of things you can get. Just don't try to say it's number of eyeballs or number of members. Those are good metrics in some cases, but they don't apply to others. And pick a starting point, and that's what these really are, is the starting point, and then build out from there.
All right.
Yes, sir, I got a little passionate in the end there, right?
You did, that's great.
I only took one breath the entire conversation.
I like it when you get passionate, that's great.
Well, the big thing about this is you're building an asset. No matter which one you start with, you're building this asset of content and information about the people that created the content.
Absolutely.
So when you learn something about Mike, that he's from Boston, now I know all the content Mike has written has this association with it. And that's the most powerful thing. And there's still tons of things we haven't done with this data that we'll be doing in the future.
Absolutely. No, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Now that we've kind of talked to you, we've had kind of the industry experts, we've had Dave on from the company. We'd also like to bring in Marcy Cohen from Sony. Marcy, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Great. And so, Marcy, you as I mentioned earlier, Marcy actually is responsible for corporate communications at Sony Electronics. And recently you launched the Sony Electronics blog. Can you talk to us a little bit about the evolution of how that community came about, where it started, and where you are today?
Sure. So at Sony Electronics, we started monitoring online buzz a long time ago, probably 5 or 6 years ago, working with Nielsen. Back then it was Planet Feedback. And, I think it's really important to start by listening, but we were doing that for a really long time and not really doing much more than that. We weren't engaging with any of the, consumers who were talking about our products and our brand. And we were just trying to tap into, what was being discussed and what the trends were. So in July of 2007, we decided to launch a corporate blog using the corporate voice best practice that Dave just spoke about, and we started having a dialogue with our customers, talking about our products, our services, our campaigns, our brand, and being very open and honest with our customers about what was going on at Sony. And what we thought they would want to hear about, and the feedback was terrific. So that was really the beginning of the blog, but as Mike mentioned when he introduced me before, we decided to take the blog to the next level and have it be much more interactive and engaging. So we also wanted to redesign it to be more in line with the look and feel of other Sony Electronics sites. So right before the Consumer Electronics Show, which was about 3 weeks ago, we launched a much more interactive community site with the cornerstone of that site was the blog, but we also have photos, videos, downloads, links to other community sites that we have at Sony Electronics, and we're going to be adding profiles and polls in the next couple of weeks. So we launched in beta, and we're just tweaking it, and then we'll fully launch really soon.
That's awesome. That was great, actually. So you actually started you started as a blog, and now you've evolved into more of a community. And can you talk a little bit more about the plans for how that's going to evolve in the future?
Sure. Well, there's a couple things. One is the way that community is going to evolve is by just adding more content to it, adding more features, keeping it fresh, listening to what people want. But we're also going to be launching neighborhoods, which are more product or service focused. And the first one that we're going to be launching is a VIO neighborhood in the spring. And basically the reason we decided to do that was because while we know that the corporate community is very interesting to people and is a good entry point for consumers into Sony, a lot of them are real enthusiasts with regard to specific product areas. So, somebody could be, a real, cyber shop enthusiast, and we actually already have a site, a community site called Digital Darkroom that's linked right off of the corporate community. So, we're really trying to tap into what consumers want. As you can imagine, a lot of people out there are very passionate about their electronics products, and we'd like to create more of a dialogue with them and to get more feedback from them on what they want to see from us and, have them really understand, what we're about. So that's really going to be the evolution, creating more neighborhoods, and they don't always have to be vertical in terms of product areas. They could be horizontal. So, we're looking at potentially doing, some kind of horizontal neighborhood that focuses on, environmental or Blu-ray. So these are areas that tap into a number of products across our product spectrum, but are not just specifically about one product area. And we think that that will resonate well with our customers.
That's great. And so the $25,000 question is how are you measuring success across not just the community that you've recently launched, but how do you plan on measuring success around all these new communities that you plan on launching?
Sure. So, ROI is really, really key for us, as you can imagine, especially in an economy such that we're in right now. But I think it's really important to understand that every community and every neighborhood that you launch has to have its own set of objectives and obviously different ways to determine what that ROI will be. Similar to in the best practice examples that Dave just said, there are different ROI for each kind of community. So what we're doing is, awareness. You guys provide us with about 25 different reports that tell us about the traffic that's happening on the community, and we're also using Omniture and Google Analytics on top of that. So traffic is important to us, but also we're looking at the quality of the conversation that we're having with these consumers, and a lot of them end up actually being service related. So what we're finding is that it's become a place where people can turn to when they're not really sure who to talk to about their customer service issue. And we're able to solve a lot of their problems working closely with our customer service group. And that ROI is terrific and actually has led us to realize that perhaps we should look into launching a service community where people can go and have their service issues taken care of right there on that community site. And then ultimately, I think that would actually look something like the peer support best practice group, because ultimately, as Dave said, you really want consumers to start helping each other, and you can then begin to take yourself out of that conversation when it comes to service. And then finally, which one of the things that is near and dear to us at Sony Electronics is the Net Promoter Score. And Dave, I saw this on every single one of your best practice communities, but I don't think you actually mentioned what it is. Net Promoter Score.
I did.
Oh, okay. Net Promoter Score is actually the willingness of someone to recommend your product or your brand to somebody else. And that's something that we're tracking throughout the company with various initiatives, and we're going to be implementing it into our community and neighborhood sites as well shortly. So those are some of the ways that we're measuring success.
I think, Marcy, to add to that, NPS, or Net Promoter Score, is a great example of how the industry's evolved, and we're not using a metric that has anything to do with the web. We're actually using a pretty standard customer satisfaction metric. So, if this doesn't move the needle of your customer satisfaction across your members or clients, then why are we doing it? Page views don't mean anything if it doesn't ultimately result in happy customers or more sales or something. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
But, and the way to really find out whether or not someone would be willing to recommend your product or your brand or your service is really by asking them, and that's very easy to do with these sites.
Yeah, totally agree. Absolutely. So, just, I guess at a high level, we're getting kind of close to the end. I want to save enough time for Q&A, but Marcy, is there anything else from your perspective that you could add, especially around how important or, how instrumental choosing a best practice or having a best practice implemented within your communities was as you start to roll these things out? Was it a factor? Is it a factor going forward?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think Paul touched on this in the beginning, that the tools are really, really important, but you really need to figure out first, what's your goals, what are your objectives, what do you really want to achieve from this community, and is a community really the best solution for you? So I think it's important to really look at all those best practice communities and, familiarize yourself with them, because I assume everybody on this call is sort of like the de facto expert at their company on social networking. And it's going to be your responsibility to advise your specific business groups or departments or product managers on which of these best practice communities would be most appropriate for their product or service. So I think these are great. You launched them a little bit after we launched our community site, and when I saw it, I was like really excited, but kind of upset at the same time that we didn't see it maybe 2 months earlier, because I think it really could have helped us. But you guys can all benefit from it, so I think it's great.
All right, that's terrific. So what I'm going to do now is Paul and Chris, you still available on the line?
Ready when you are.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So what I'm going to do is kind of go through some of the questions that we got through Twitter, and they're really kind of all across the board, but I think I'd like to start back, Paul, with you. One of the questions that came up as you were talking was, it's great to have, people come to the site or, whatever it is that you're doing for social media, and it's great to have an initial, burst of people coming to interact with you. How do you keep people engaged going forward? Is there a silver bullet to keep people engaged in whatever it is that you're doing after you launch it?
Well, be interesting. And I don't mean to be glib by saying that, but give them something interesting that will make them want to come back. I mean, think of your own behavior. Think of the websites or the publications or the TV programs that you revisit. There are those that give you something that's memorable or entertaining. And I think really delivering an experience that is memorable is key. And that could be something that's offbeat and bizarre. It could be funny. It could be a completely different take on an issue that people haven't thought of before. And one of the models I like to use for this is, frankly, newspaper columnists. Professional columnists are very good at coming up with different angles on issues. They'll look at an issue and say, what if I take a completely different approach to this than the conventional wisdom and try to make an argument that is just different from what everybody else is saying? And that's a very effective technique that opinion writers use. Use something like that to make your content always something unexpected and delightful.
It's funny when you said that. The first thing that popped into my head was that I am like a lost addict, and they created a show that it's completely different. It's completely, completely different than anything you've ever seen on TV before. And I always wonder every week why I go back and watch it, because I seem to have more questions than I do answers. But I think you're right. Keeping stuff fresh and keeping stuff important and relevant is important.
And where you don't have to appeal to everyone. Seth Godin says it wonderfully. He says if your product appeals to everyone, it's probably not very interesting. You want to target the people who you really want to reach. What's unique about them?
One of the things that we recommend to clients too is don't just assume that the community is going to create this vibrant environment. Leverage whatever for the points of enthusiasm that are already going on in the company. So at McDonald's, that was their conference they have every 2 years that everybody gets really excited about. We actually hijacked the registration form of that because they had to. They already had to go to that registration form to register, but we added a content question that became a best practice they wanted to share, and we added profile update questions because they were already filling out their profile. So, if you expect people to just show up and be enthusiastic, it's probably not going to happen. If you take events, whether it's company events or product launches and all those things, and use those as points to harvest the conversation, just like we are with Twitter right now, that's when you get some success. You build momentum in the community.
So, Chris, a couple of people have written in and said that they're actually struggling to get their marketing executives to see past that fear of no control that social media represents. And so the question, I guess, that's come in is, how do you get people to see beyond that, especially those guys in the marketing department that are, that really have a fear of not being able to control that conversation?
Well, one thing is, it's so glib to say, but it seems to be in our, commuted Bible of this stuff is, were they ever in control? Because I'd offer not. But if you're not even listening and if you don't even have a doorstep out to talk from, then how are you going to have the conversation back on even, repositioning? So one way you could say it is, if a marketing department is just launching their materials out into the world and not doing anything to have conversations around them, then that's a lack of control right there, because all you've done is lob the data and said, go have fun with it. And then if you're not participating to it, then you're not responding. Building a community means that you're going to have those kind of conversations in your yard as opposed to having to go visit other people. When you have no control, when you have to go out and defend yourself on other people's blogs who can delete your comments. I'd rather have that conversation on my blog or my community platform where, me, the brand, can, make sure that people aren't talking about things that I wouldn't want to say in front of my living room, in front of my daughter. But you know what? If I'm having a conversation and someone says, I don't like your product, then I'd rather have that conversation on my site, because then maybe there's an opportunity for conversion, or maybe there's an opportunity to learn. So the only way there's never control is if you're not in the conversation to begin with.
One of the best examples of that is, we were formerly known as iUpload, and if you search, someone slammed Robin Hopper, the other co-founder, about the SEO of our site. They didn't slam the SEO, they said, the iUpload site sucks because it's not accessible at all. We use tables and all kinds of bad things. And I think the guy was expecting a fight, and instead Robin replied, hey, you make some good points. Where can you point us to some tips to make it a better site? This guy became a fan of the company. We used some of his services. We learned everything we know about SEO today, from this slamming post or comment in our blog site. And this worked well in the restaurant business. People that were the most angry, if you fixed their problem and listened to them, became your best, promoters.
And this is Paul. I just want to jump in on top of that. I did an interview with the editor of The Consumerist, which is a wonderful consumer advocacy site, and he said exactly that. He said the best way to build affinity with your customers is to be willing to admit when you've made a mistake, and they will be so much more loyal if you show that human side.
Absolutely. And Paul, that ties into kind of your first book, and not to bring it up again, but with the new influencers, there's both positive and negative influencers, right? And part of the challenge is actually being able to do what Dave just mentioned, identify those negative influencers and be able to turn them into allies for the company, right?
Time after time, we hear stories of how negative and the people who are most negative become a company's biggest fans if the company will simply listens to them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, everything I learned about social media, I learned when I was a waiter in a restaurant. How does that sound?
One of the things that is very successful for us at Sony is we have a site called Frontline. That used to be kind of a closed community, but now it's much more open, and anyone can join and give us feedback about our products. We ask specific questions. But one thing that we did with some of those, the people that were engaging with that site, is we arranged intimate dinners with small groups of people who were Frontline members with Sony executives. So we could really tap into them and find out more about what they thought of our products and what ideas they had. And I think that's sort of just taking it to the next level, where you're not just engaging with them on your community site, but you're actually meeting them and giving them access to your company that, is really special.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So what kinds of companies does social media marketing not work for? And I'll just kind of pose that out to the whole group. Can you think of any? Are there any? I mean, Chris, Paul, Dave, are there any? Marcy, are there any types of companies that just it's not a good fit for?
If you sell $1,000,000 aircraft engines and you have 20 customers in the world, then your tool of choice should be the telephone.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm hard pressed to think of anybody unless someone that, like you said, only has a couple of customers. I mean, if you don't have if you have customers that aren't online, okay, sure. But still, even I use car buying as an example. Traditional media, in terms of the sort of customer life cycle curve, traditional media goes after awareness, consideration, and trial. They don't go any further with respect to awareness, consideration, trial, adoption, loyalty, and referral. So if I buy a car, is the car dealer done with me for another 3 years? No, they should probably keep in touch with me. They should probably help me promote how much I love that car. They should want to get me back in 3 years, but the most important thing is they should want me standing up, chiming how great they are over the next 3 years. And that's what social media marketing is doing. It's talking about the customer during their complete life cycle, not just getting them to buy.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Chris, what do you think? I mean, are there companies out there that, Paul brought up the example of the aircraft engines. Are there any other types of companies out there that social media marketing just doesn't apply to?
Well, it's not that it doesn't apply, but I would say that any company that's really driving really long and hard by way of their legal, I mean, if every word coming out of everybody's mouth has to go through a legal stringer, then you're going to have to work on that one. The other point of view would be to say that anyone who has kind of reporting duties, I've talked to a couple of different companies doing pharmaceutical creation, and if something gets reported and it's a HIPAA problem, then, if they have to report on every single complaint, then sometimes there's a little bit of a cost to that, building up a platform around that kind of a thing. The other people who maybe shouldn't be digging into a social community right away are just people who aren't ready to really embrace the customer in that way, or people with like a minimum transaction cost. I find it kind of interesting that awareness has the McDonald's community, because when I sometimes give ideas of communities that I wouldn't envision, it would be, how much do I want to talk to somebody else about a Big Mac? However, if it's community, say franchisees or community employees or like an internal platform, it makes all the sense in the world. So,
well, and so that being said, though, take the CVS example. How much do people want to talk about a pharmacy? They don't. So CVS, as a host of a community created For All the Ways You Care, which is a user-generated content site, which says, hey, our customers are often that sandwich generation, the people that are taking care of their parents and their children. Gee, we're a natural place to host a conversation between those customers. So you don't have to talk about our product. We can just give you some space to talk about what's important to you. And by the way, that makes us a good corporate citizen. So with McDonald's, they know moms are absolutely their audience. If you look at Procter & Gamble, they've got different examples of communities they've set up. Hershey's, there's only so much you can say about chocolate. Well, it turns out there's lots to say about chocolate. There's recipes, there's all kinds of stuff. They've actually got chocolate TV. So, the first thing I ever learned talking to customers is never trivialize their business. It's way deeper than you think it is, and it's way broader, and they've got a lot more science behind it. McDonald's is, the scientists that get it.
Yeah, right.
I just wanted to add that companies who are not ready to put resources towards a social networking community should not start one. Because if you open yourselves up to your customers and don't have anyone to staff moderating and answering their questions, they're going to go away and they're not going to think very highly of you. So I would just ensure that you have the proper staff. You need a community manager who's going to moderate the content, keep it fresh, put together editorial calendars, and be ready to write on the fly when something interesting has come up.
A lot of people are asking about the difference between B2B and B2C, and I would say that there's a whole blend in between there. We used to always say they're similar in a lot of ways, and they're just shades of gray in terms of security. Mm-hmm. And I think all of this applies to not just you talking to consumers. In fact, the McDonald's community that we do is them talking to the restaurant owner-operators and their suppliers. It's still thousands of people. Mm-hmm. There's a valuable dialogue to go on between you and whoever your audience is. It doesn't have to be consumers of your product. It could be the people that resell your product. It could be, let's say you're a consulting firm and you've got thousands of consultants out there. There's chatter going on amongst them. I was at Microsoft for 11 years, and I would love to have gone back in time and have every one of those employees have a blog just internally just to share best practices that we redid or find people who are experts in topics that have been forgotten about.
Mm-hmm. So here's a question for Paul specifically. And someone asks, is social media just another marketing channel?
No, it's not, because it is about it's a mistake to think of it that way, because it is about changing the nature of the interaction with your customers. It's the most fundamental part of how a company operates. It's conversations with customers, constituents, shareholders, partners. You are changing the way those conversations are conducted. So that is not marketing. It may begin as marketing. That's why I said at the outset, this is transformative, because once that happens, once these conversations become embedded into your culture, then everything changes. So that's why it's a mistake to think about this as just marketing.
Chris, what do you think? It's just another channel, or?
No, because it doesn't really retrofit so nicely. I mean, I consider it another means of business communications. I don't think of it as just another channel, because, I mean, we can use the same, I think of it like a phone. You could use the same kind of channels to make content. You can do it to just have conversations. You can do it to contact and forth with people you love, or you can make business happen. That to me isn't the same as marketing. Marketing would be sort of a discipline and a set of strategies. Social media is a new delivery mechanism and a new set of tools.
If you think of where we were at with email in 1990, let's say, you had to drag sales staff and executives to even care about email. Why would I spend time on email answering questions? Today, if you tried to pull their BlackBerry away from them or pull email away from them, they would be kicking and screaming harder than you could imagine. That's what we need to get to with social media, because it's got the exact same potential. In fact, it'll fix a lot of the things that email breaks.
Yeah, just so everybody knows, we've had just a tremendous influx of questions, so we'll do our best to respond to all the ones we can't get to offline in the next few days. And we just appreciate everybody writing in. It's just, given the time, we only have about 4 minutes left or so we might not have enough time to get to everybody's questions. But
well, there's lots of experts online in the feed too. So
absolutely,
as a community, let's all get these questions answered. There's a bunch of people chiming in on NPS too.
Absolutely. So another question for everybody on the line. How do you use these tactics with senior business executives? You publish offers, you try to get phone numbers. How do you actually use the specific social media tactics and get buy-in from senior business executives? Is there a specific way to do it? Is it just about educating them on what social media is all about? Or, Paul, Chris, are there any specific things that you've used in the past to be successful? Or Mark?
Examples. They want to see if you have an ROI, if you have numbers, that's great, but mainly they want to see examples. And if you can show them that your competitors are doing it, that's very persuasive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. I have a lot of meetings with our executive management team talking about this, and it's become a really important part of how we do business now. But, if you can show them metrics and, that your competitors are doing it, it really goes a long way. And I also think that bringing in third-party experts into your company to meet with your executives and also your, more middle management groups goes a long way, because I sometimes find that I can talk till I'm blue in the face, but because I work for Sony, they don't believe me as much as if, I brought Chris in or somebody from Forrester or, one of our retailers who's engaging in social networking well. So I think that bringing in third-party experts really goes a long way.
I have one last question, one that a couple people have asked. I want to make sure we get to it. One came in from a startup company, another came in from a separate bigger company, but they actually asked a very similar question, and it's, how much time do I need to dedicate? Well, number one, should my company start a blog? And number two, how much time should I dedicate to blogging every day? So I'm going to leave that question open and just let anybody jump in. Dave, if you want to take it.
Wow, I get complaints that from different types of customers, how can you blog so much? And then other people would say, why don't you blog more? You're not on Twitter enough. I think it depends on your company. I mean, you could ask the same question, but take social media out of it. How many times should I do a customer presentation a day? It depends on your business, depends on what you're selling, depends on the receptiveness of your audience. But when you speak, when you do that, stop and listen, and you'll know if you got it right, because are there more questions coming in? Are you getting a huge response to that? So, I would say there is no answer, but listen after you speak.
Paul, Chris, what do you guys think?
Chris, you're the master.
I'm the typist. So, no, I'd say that, to me, blogging always has a value. That's what I call wide area funnel activity. I mean, a lot of times I'm giving information that I think will be useful to the people that are in my community that can take that and run with it and do something. So, I mean, it's sort of the question, how often should I give a customer presentation? How often can I equip the people who listen to me and who care about me to do something good with it all? If I can equip them and give them something, I mean, look at Marcy's community. Everybody in the cyber shot space can go out with a camera and just shoot stuff. But what if in that community they're talking back and forth about how you can get more out of that camera? Then everybody's going to be excited about it. Everyone's going to come away feeling cooler. They're going to feel like they know stuff that their colleagues don't know. Hell, I'd make content in that community all damn day if I could get more cyber shots sold. So,
and also sharing the pictures that they took. And
exactly, the results.
Yeah.
So based on what I heard, I mean, if you think about it, right in the beginning we talked about listening and how important that was, and really, I mean, at the end of the day, asking the question, should I start a blog, is really the wrong question, right? It should be, what do my customers want us to do? What's the best channel for us to go to, for them, and how do we leverage social media in a way that's really going to impact our relationship with those people? Well, with that said, I just want to say thanks to everybody on the line. Again, Marcy, Chris, Paul, and Dave had a lot of fun chatting with everybody today. We really appreciate the time. Yeah, and I want to apologize to everybody who's still on the line. Really appreciate everybody's time, and I promise we'll try to get answers to all the questions we weren't able to answer in the next couple of days. And just thanks everybody for joining.